So the Big Ten, this is me talking. I think the Big Ten, you could argue, is the most important conference for the future of college baseball. Like obviously the big two financially are going to be the Big Ten and the SEC. And we could wake up tomorrow and there's like no conferences. It's so chaotic. But as we sit here tonight, these two leagues have all the juice, most of the juice. And so, the Big Ten has a very interesting history in baseball. Obviously, like Ohio State in the 60s. I would say Michigan in the 80s, that they had that really good run and famous players, right? Like Jim Abbott and Barry Larkin and Chris Sabo. People my age, like Michigan baseball, like I've got visuals of that. But then it was kind of like just like a nice little league for a while. Like it wasn't the schools were national brands, but the baseball wasn't like nationally relevant. Again, that's me speaking. I hope that people are not offended by that. But then the 2010s happened, and this league got hot. Like, and I told you guys before we hit record. I remember, I think it was the Big Ten tournament, but you and Purdue. There was Doug Schreiber's best team at Purdue, 2012. They hosted in Gary, Indiana, and that's the regional that Kent State won on their magical run. But I felt like you guys in Purdue in the Big Ten tournament had a really competitive game, and it was a brouhaha, and that got a lot of eyeballs. And for me, that was just like, okay, that's interesting. You have my attention. And then Purdue hosts, and then your 2013 team has to go through Tallahassee on the way to Omaha. And of course, there's guys like Kyle Schwarber on that team. And then the whole decade rolls forward. You guys are this is the part that people don't remember. You guys were a top 8 national seed in 2014. Stanford upset you, but you were the 4 seed too. Like you didn't fence scrape your way into a top 8 seed. And then Illinois does it the next year in 2015. And, of course, Vanderbilt clips them, the Dansby Swanson team. And then 2018 is Minnesota, where, they could have been a top 8 seed, but they end up having to play Oregon State, who wins the whole thing. And then, of course, Michigan in 2019, they literally play in Game 3 of the College World Series. So I'll start with you, Skip, but like, what do you remember about the beginning of that decade in the Big Ten, and specifically your all's team? Like, it feels like it got good real fast.
It was. I honestly think it was a combination of a lot of things. If you talk about the team in particular, we had a lot of good players. I mean, and that's a result of the Ben sitting on here being, the job done in recruiting. But if you go back to me, the construction of the league, and Ben, you can correct me and step in here. I'm getting older, my memory, but we made some strategic moves with the advent of the Big Ten network. So the Big Ten network was just beginning. It was starting out, and and our brainchild was, let's take our recruiting national. Not, because back then it was still, you kind of recruited regionally. And if you brought in a national player, it was because there was a special relationship or something like that. There just wasn't a lot of it going on. I joke with people all the time. It'd be like, hey, this is, Coach Smith from Indiana University. And kids would be like, where's that? It's like, well, it's the school that Bobby Knight coaches at. Then they're like, oh, but once the Big Ten network came into play, people knew you and saw you. So we actually strategically made some hires just to build some network, which then opened that pipeline, which allowed us to assemble a national roster. And not that you can't do it locally, because we talk about that all the time. Like, we want to get the best players, but it really put us on the map, and it allowed us to broaden it. And I think thus putting more depth and more talent on the roster. And back to the games that you referenced, and at that time, even at Purdue, I think you said there were some, we actually had some, battles, some real battles. There were a lot of big leaguers on the field that time. So it was talent plus, just the time, and people were starting to invest in facilities. We were one of Bob Todd, to me, is still the godfather of the Big Ten. I mean, I thought he was doing it at a level nobody else was doing it at the time. Now, Bud Midall, you referenced those teams. Ironically, we just had a championship reunion on campus, and the names that you referenced, those teams are running around there. So I think it was that stair step, and then there was a little lull, but then I think that Big Ten network, and then people investing in facilities and putting money into baseball in the Big Ten.
Yeah. Hey, Ben, before you go, like when you say Coach Todd at Ohio State, it's like a couple years ago, I went to Columbus for the first time. And like that's the part I think people nationally are missing in college baseball. It's like you go to Ohio State's baseball stadium and it's like, whoa, like this is not a cute, small facility. Like this, if they hosted like a regional or super regional, it would be bonkers in there. Like they could easily do 5,000 or 6,000 people, I would think.
Which they were doing pretty consistently back in that time too.
Yep.
So, I always try to talk about him whenever I talk about Big Ten baseball, because he was doing it at a high level and consistently, pre us, if you will.
Yeah. Hey Ben, give me your perspective on what Skip just said, and I'm going to force you to include Joey Donato in your comments here.
Yeah, I'd agree. Skip gave me some of the credit for building the roster. I think you also have to give credit to Ty Neal. I mean, he was the one that also really helped assemble that group, joining Skip's staff now. But he was a key architect to that group. I think the 2012, the end of the 2012 season, Runes, we left that Big Ten tournament. We lost the Big Ten championship to Purdue, but we left there getting on the bus saying, man, like, we think we could really do damage in a regional in 2012. And we understood that we were behind at the start of the year, but I think we won 15-20 to close the year. And all the freshmen and sophomores that we played consistently just started to become men and physical and comfortable with the college game. I think, like Skip said, the Big Ten network really impacted our program. I think the money and the inflow of money from the Big Ten network into the athletic department helped the investment for several schools in the league. And, if you look at that era, the ballparks that were built, I think really helped elevate the league and put it in a position to have multiple hosts and super regionals and all that stuff. So, I think, like Skip said, going back to the national recruiting, Joey Donato, I mean, he's as good as there was, as good as I've ever been around in terms of a college pitcher. 4 years, just always took the baseball, incredibly competitive, but didn't have to say a word, and you could just feel his presence.
5 foot, 10, 9, 10 of him, right?
Yeah, it didn't matter though. I mean, he was so competitive. I mean, and I think holds a lot of records. The wins, I think, strikeouts and innings at IU. But yeah, that team was a lot of fun, and 12 was fun, 13 was fun. I think of the 13 group, Skip, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe we went to Florida and won 2 out of 3 during our spring break trip. And that was like, we knew we were good in 12, but when we went to Florida, it took 2 out of 3 from a program that had been really good. We're sitting in the dugout that Sunday, and it was like, okay, we can be really good. And we had established at Indiana over the previous several years, we could always really hit, but that team in 2013 could really pitch it too. Top 10 team in the country in ERA, anchored by Donato, Slagers, and then the emergence of Corson Carr and Kyle Hart and so many guys on the mound that, in my opinion, really embraced their roles. And
I think we had 4 big league arms on that team, didn't we? On that staff.
Good group.
And this is a question for both of you guys. Like, I think about Slagers was an Arizona kid where you guys really took a flyer on him. Like, he was not, as I understand it, he was not really a successful high school pitcher. But Arizona's good high school baseball, and he's 6'8", and there's something to dream on there. Donato is that's a San Diego kid. Like the whole West Coast. Like, it's not lost on the West Coast that San Diego's got great high school baseball. So it's like you have to differentiate, like, why are teams passing on him or that type of thing. We'll get to the hitters in a second, but tell me about, like, when you go, outside of your, your sweet spot area in recruiting, like, how do you get comfortable with, okay, why aren't these teams saying yes, but we're good with this?
Well, I mean, he was a funny story. Ben knows where I'm going with this one, but he was a funny story in the recruitment because a really good friend of mine, Dom Johnson in San Diego, who I trust a lot, is talking all about this, Donato. So we go see him, and of course we like him, but I go back to, I like big body, projectable body guys, and Joey didn't quite fit that profile, but we made him an offer, and I'll leave that private what the offer was. But I remember we were kind of at that point, like, okay, a lot of interest in Indiana because campus is different. And when the kids actually get on a plane and make a visit, they actually love the campuses in the Midwest. And so anyway, we're kind of hung up, and they asked for, I'll just say 20% more. And I said, all right, here's what I'm going to do. We'll up that offer, but he's got to show us that he can miss bats, but being Donato, fly back out there. And what do you think he does that game to get the extra 20%? I think he punched out 14 or something, right, Ben? Literally, I think he punched out 14 guys, and we're like, okay, you've earned it. And that's kind of how it all happened. And he's, I don't know how he flew under the radar. Maybe it's, again, body type or the early recruiting and things like that. But there's so many good players around the country in general, particularly, though, in California. We feel like we got pretty lucky with that one.
That's good. Hey, Ben, BG, let me take you to the hitters. So, Schwarber's really interesting. If I'm not mistaken, every single relative went to Ohio State. I could be wrong about that, but he's an Ohio kid. And then, Sam Travis was a great player on those teams, and he's a Chicago kid. And it always feels like that Indiana and Chicago, that's a pretty clear pathway. And then Dustin Demuth is a, LaPorte slicer. And, that's now him not going to Purdue is weird, I guess. I don't know. You guys, I don't know the background there. But and I say that because Doug Schreiber's dad is the most famous Indiana high school baseball coach ever, and that's the same high school that Demuth went to. So tell me about the hitters, BG. Any interesting stories in that group?
Yeah, well, Demuth, that family, sister played basketball at IU. That helped. They lived in Bloomington before moving up north, so that helped. Familiarity, but yeah, I mean, another guy that had an incredible career. Another guy that we were lucky to have, similar to Joey, for 4 years, and just an absolute mainstay. But yeah, he in 13, I think he led our team in hitting and All-American and did so many things. I mean, he stole bases. He was unbelievable at third. Obviously, Schwarber was great. People don't realize this. Sam Travis won Big Ten Player of the Year over Kyle, and he won Freshman of the Year prior and Player of the Year the following year over Kyle. And brought an element of toughness and such incredible presence to the box. And it was, I mean, 1 through 9, you really had to work through that lineup. I think of Donley tucked into the 5. Basil was old. Casey Smith had a great year. Will Nolan had a great year.
That was my favorite player, by the way. But
yeah, it was just a really long lineup to navigate and really good hitters all the way. And, at a time when power numbers in college baseball were down significantly, to have a guy like Schwarber, hit as many homers as he did, totally changed our team.
That's awesome. What about when Kent State did what they did I would imagine schools in the Midwest, maybe you guys had played them but I would think I've never put 2 and 2 together here, but were schools in the Midwest dang, yeah, sure. Why not? What was their impact on the Midwest?
Well, I remember playing at Miami. I think there was one year, I got to check my research here, do the fact checkers out there. But there was one year, I think they actually led the nation in ERA when I was coaching at Miami, either as an assistant, whatever. So Birkbeck, mainstay there, has done a fantastic job. But I remember, it's funny you brought that up. I remember watching them win and going, God, I just that professional jealousy. You're like, God, I wish, that was just going, I want to do. And I remember that. I was like, man, that is so cool. How cool for that. Northern school. Nobody thinks you should do it. And they're going to the College World Series. And how good that must feel. And then, of course, a year later, we got to have that same feeling.
That's awesome. All right, so BG, so we fast forward a year. So Purdue hosted, but they had hosts in Gary. They didn't have their new facility yet, or at least it was in flux, I suppose. And then you guys, this is easy to misremember. You actually hosted a regional in Bloomington and then went to Florida State. So I'm going to have you focus on the regional, and then Skip, I'll take you. But feel free to jump in there too, but then we'll go to the super. There's this old wives' tale that the first time you host, it's going to be a hot mess. Everyone's going to be spooked. No one's going to know what to do. It's very distracting. And we do see a lot of first-time hosts get beat. That was not what happened to the Hoosiers, though. Tell me what you remember about that regional, BJ.
It all comes down to that first night. The opening night for me, we're playing Valpo, and they had an old right-hander on the mound. I forget his name, but dominated us with cutters all night. And we were trailing late, and Chad Clark, who at that point hadn't hit a homer all year, hit a walk-off homer. And I feel like we could finally breathe. I felt like you said, Runes, that uptight tension, big crowd, first time hosting. And now all of a sudden it's like, now you're chasing the whole game. And once Chad hit the homer, I felt like you could breathe. Our guys relaxed. Then we played and kind of rolled through the rest of the regional. But, if he doesn't do that, who knows what happens with that run.
Skip, what do you remember about that first time hosting experience?
Well, definitely that. But going back to your original question about this construction of Big Ten baseball, and I tell people, like, ironically, it coincided with the addition of that new stadium. I mean, opening that stadium up and facilities. And Ben, Florida was in that regional, right? If I remember,
as a 3 seed, correct?
Yes. Well, I remember Sully. We jumped in the car and we drove up to the old facility. The old facility was still there, the old Simbauer, and you probably remember it, Runes. Like, it was a glorified high school field. And I can't, how Sully talks, so I can't say it on national, airwaves here. But he's like, "How did you guys recruit this team to this facility?" Because the 2013 was the first year we played in the new stadium. And, it was a simple response. It's like, people, we sell people here and people matter. So going back to, Ben's right. Like, we had some interesting cast of characters on there. I mean, Chad Clark, the kid that hit the walk-off home run. Yeah, he hadn't hit one his entire time. And it hits a 2-out, 2 or 3 run dinger to win it all. And that was kind of like, it's like the NCAA basketball tournament. You get by that game one, you can finally settle in. And there's also kind of really another famous, they have Chad Clark Day every year. They continue to do that at Indiana, but there's also the catch. And there was a catch. And I actually play it for our team all the time because I'm telling my center fielders, like, be a ball hawk. We had a guy, so Justin Curita made an unbelievable catch, which turned into a double play when we were playing Austin Peay in a tight situation. And so those were 2 plays, but it was like, how you get that feeling? We're like, man, we just can't be beat because guys are playing well. They're feeling good, going our way. And the crowd. And I remember too, standing on the concourse at one time and seeing people actually in a line to get tickets. And that was it just hit my mind, like, you know what? We've arrived on the college baseball scene. I mean, we've been building this thing for years. I mean, and again, Ben's dad was a part of that DAD that, took a chance on hiring me. And then, Fred Glass and others that came after it. It was just this culmination of, like, what a beautiful weekend, and then we went it on, we went it, and then the next step.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you guys, fast forwarding, you're getting sent to Tallahassee. That's who, Florida State, if people go back and look in this new era, like since 1999 when we've had super regionals, it's unbelievable how many times Florida State has not only hosted a regional, but won it. Like, they never lose a regional, like almost never. Now, they have gotten clipped in some super regionals, but still very intimidating place to play. They're well coached. They're super talented. Skip, why don't you take us? Give me your recollections of the super.
Ben's smiling right now. I think Ben should comment on how tough it is to play in that environment. Ben, do you want to prelim that first?
As a third base coach?
Well, the number of times we'd be in the dugout and we'd look at each other and he'd say, is so-and-so in the right spot? And of course, then I'd say, like, what? He'd be like, is so-and-so in the right spot? And you can't hear. I mean, it's so loud, and the chants. I mean, it's the people are on top of you. The super regional atmosphere in Tallahassee that year was unbelievable, Runes. I mean, it was incredible. And the one guy that we haven't talked about on that team yet, Runes, that was so incredible to me was Will Corson-Carr, because he was a freshman that didn't pitch a ton for us. And in the early part of the season. And then we got hot late and started going to him a lot. And he was a guy that took the ball in absolutely critical spots over the course of the Big Ten tournament, and then the regional, and then the super regional. And it changed our whole pitching staff.
You remember Ben? So they had mowed through their regional, I think, if I remember, and just really dominated their opponents. And back to Ben and Will and what he said about Will Corson-Carr. I think it was late. We were trying to hold on to a lead. It's game one. We're beating, Indiana beating Florida State at Florida State, and we go to Corson-Carr late, and we're like, and I think it was we're up a run or something like that. And anyway, it's first and second, he comes in, like throws a wild pitch right away. And I remember standing on the third base rail, and here's a wild pitch. Here comes the ball rolling over at my feet. And you're just like, oh, what a great move that is. Here's like tying run and winning run. And then and that was with less than 2 outs, but then found a way to pitch his way out of it. And and after you get that game one, now your mind starts playing tricks with you. You're like, wait a minute, you win one more, we're going to the College World Series. And but our guys really believed, and that is a credit to all the guys. I know we're probably missing Ben names on there, the Efrosses and all those guys. They gave us confidence. I can tell you they did me. I won't speak for Ben, but when you're lining up and you're going in, and that's a rarity, because I'm a pretty confident dude. Ben's a confident dude. But we had a locker room full of guys that just really believed we're going to win. I don't care who we're playing, and so that was really cool to experience.
So it wasn't. Oh, but you were right too, Skip. By the way, Florida State in the regional 3-0, 32-4. They just bum rushed it, and then you guys scored 21 runs in that. Like you beat them 10-9 and 11-6. Besides Schwarber, was it like Schwarber? Like you can't watch the Phillies and not see Kyle Schwarber, right? Like he feels like literally the heartbeat of that team. Who else? Like was Sam Travis? Like I just assume every Chicago guy's a big talker.
Well, he hit a big home run in that thing. I remember Ben laid the one that stood out to me that I still think when I think back to that series was Justin Curitin, who was probably hitting 9-hole for us, and it was late in the game. We had got bases loaded maybe or something, but anyway. He caps one, shoots it down the right field line for multiple RBI triple in the 7th or 8th. And it was when he came sliding around there, you're picking him up and high-fiving him after that. But that's when your mind goes, you know what? We're winning this thing. And it was just everybody pitching in. But, and Ben, like you said, like you couldn't think it was so loud. We had a whatever run lead even in the second game. And we got all these pitchers that crowd got to us. That thing wasn't over. I think they either got tying run on deck or something like that. We had a decent lead. So that thing took the last hour. But when that last out was made, it was a lot of emotion of everything that had gone into, not only for Indiana. Well, I'll back it up, not personally for the university, but also for the conference that, hey, you can win in the Big Ten Conference and get to the World Series. So a lot went into that.
Did you guys hear because to your point, Skip, and I think I said it earlier, your 2013 trip was the first Big Ten team to Omaha since 1984. So however many, I guess that's 30 years basically. Did you guys hear from all your peer coaches in the Big Ten? I would imagine the whole league was fired up, or maybe not so much because that's going to hurt recruiting a little bit.
Yeah, Ben, did you hear from everybody? I didn't hear from
oh, no. Congratulatory text.
Yeah, I did. It was funny you said. I remember at the hotel in Omaha, I was on an escalator, and Barry Larkin was on the escalator, and we were talking about, hey man, the last time this has happened, I think you were in it, on 84. I remember that vividly.
Yeah, that was that was incredible. And then of course you guys are a top 8 seed the next year, and then we mentioned Illinois had that incredible year the next year. And then, Minnesota, I had the super regional that Minnesota lost to Oregon State. And I remember thinking, man, if they got sent anywhere else, they had a really nice team. But that Oregon State team was a joke. I mean, they had their lineup had 4 first-rounders in it that didn't include Stephen Kwan. I mean, that was a incredibly good Oregon State team. And then, of course, Michigan in 2019. It's not just that Michigan played in Game 3 of the College World Series finals. They had to go through UCLA. UCLA, it's easy for people to forget, even though Vandy won the national title that year, they were not the number 1 seed in the tournament. That was UCLA. And that was a really incredible UCLA. Vandy was the number 2 overall seed. So anyway, that just an incredible decade for the league.